Okay, so get ready, because we're diving into some seriously deep waters today. Parenting.
Oh, boy.
How do we actually, equip these little humans
Yeah.
to deal with, well, life as we know it? And we're talking discipline and what really builds resilience.
Right.
And get this, our source material is a bit of a wild card.
Okay.
We're breaking down a clip from Darren. You know him, right?
Yeah, I've seen him around.
The Scouse sit-off guy on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to ruffle some feathers,
He's known for that.
to say the least.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this so interesting. He dives head first into stuff most parents wouldn't even say in a whisper.
Yeah, he does.
So we
Yeah.
get this raw, unfiltered look at the realities of raising kids today.
It's refreshing.
And he comes out swinging.
Yeah.
Like right out of the gate, he says children should fear their parents more than anyone else in the world. He says that fear instilled through discipline, that's the foundation of respect.
Wow.
That's how they learn to deal with a world that doesn't mess around. What do you think? Is there any method to his madness?
What's so interesting here is that he's not some expert sitting in an office somewhere. This is real-life experience he's talking about.
Yeah.
And his words, as crazy as they may seem, sometimes they resonate with people.
Yeah.
It's not even about agreeing with everything he says.
Right.
It's more like, why do these ideas strike a nerve? What does that say about parents today?
It's like he's tapping into this, primal fear of not preparing our kids for the real deal.
Totally.
But his fear, actual fear, is that the best way to motivate a kid?
That is the question, isn't it? It all comes back to attachment theory. You know, a child's early bond with their caregivers, that's huge.
Right.
Ideally, that bond is built on security and trust.
Right.
And that lays the foundation for all their future relationships.
Yeah.
But Guy's coming from this place of, you need authority and respect through, a healthy fear.
Right.
That's his path to resilience.
So instead of shying away from little fear,
Yeah.
he's saying maybe it's about teaching kids to process and handle those feelings within the safety of their family, of course.
Yeah.
That's pretty out there,
It's a radical idea, for sure.
especially these days.
Oh, yeah.
But then he goes on to say, we're too quick to shield kids from negative emotions in general. He says they need exposure to all of it. Fear, anger, sadness, all within the safety of home, with their parents as guides.
Yeah.
That's how they learn to really deal with those emotions later in life.
Right.
Emotional immunization.
It's like, yeah, you need a little exposure to the bad stuff to build up your immunity to the really bad stuff.
Controlled exposure
Exactly.
to the elements.
There's actually a lot of research on this, the importance of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is allowing kids to feel the full range of human emotions.
Right.
This doesn't mean you just give them free rein to do whatever, though.
No, of course not.
You've got to create a safe space for them where they can experience, process, and learn to regulate their emotions with their parents' help.
So it's less about never feeling scared or sad. It's more about having that safety net while they figure it out.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, it sucks that you're upset right now, but I'm here to help you through it instead of don't you dare cry.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. It's about that sweet spot between protecting and preparing.
Right.
And it's worth pointing out that different cultures, different generations, we all handle emotions differently.
That's true.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Okay, so culture plays a huge role in this whole fear and discipline thing.
Totally.
But then G takes this sharp turn and starts talking about the spoiled kid syndrome.
Oh, yeah, he does.
He paints this very vivid picture of what happens when we overindulge our kids, when we don't set those firm boundaries.
He doesn't hold back, does he?
Mm.
He uses these almost comical examples like taking away video games or limiting phone time
Yeah.
to really emphasize his point about the dangers of instant gratification
Yeah.
and how that can spiral,
Yeah.
lead to a lack of discipline, even substance abuse. He really goes there.
So he's basically saying that giving a kid everything they want is setting them up for failure. Is there any truth to that?
Well, let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
What Guy's highlighting, and I'll admit he's being a bit dramatic, is the importance of setting healthy boundaries,
Okay.
which is crucial. But to say that's the only thing that leads to issues like substance abuse, that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's complex, right?
Yes.
There's no easy answer.
Okay, so overindulging our kids might not directly cause substance abuse, but I think Guy's on to something with this whole boundaries thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But how do you actually set those boundaries effectively?
Right.
It's not like it used to be. Kids today, they're bombarded with distractions.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Temptations everywhere you look.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole new world of parenting challenges.
It really is.
And this is where it's helpful to think about the different parenting styles.
Okay.
You know, like you've got your authoritarian parents, the super strict ones,
Okay.
high on control, low on warmth.
Right.
Then you've got the permissive type, basically the opposite.
Yeah.
Few rules, lots of freedom.
Maybe too much freedom.
Maybe. And then there's that sweet spot, the authoritative style.
Authoritative. Sounds kind of official.
Right, like they've got a parenting degree. But seriously, it's about finding that balance
Okay.
between setting those clear limits, having expectations, but also being tuned into your child's needs and feelings.
So it's not just about laying down the law.
No, it's about having those open conversations,
Right.
explaining the why behind the rules.
Right.
And, even getting kids involved in the decision-making when it's appropriate, of course.
So it's more like a collaboration, less dictatorship.
Exactly. Instead of, because I said so, it's more like, hey, here's the deal.
Right.
Here's why we have this rule.
Yeah.
How can we make this work for everybody?
Like that.
It's all about teaching kids to think for themselves, make good choices, understand that actions have consequences.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room.
Oh boy, here we go.
That thing Guy said that's been bugging me. Remember when he went on that rant about cannabis,
Oh yeah, that was something else.
anger, and what did he call them?
Violent potheads.
Yeah, violent potheads. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one.
Yeah, that was a bit out there. It's important to be careful with those kinds of statements,
Yeah.
especially with the potential for, bias and harmful stereotypes.
Right, of course.
So let's break it down. Is there actually a link between using cannabis and anger,
Right.
especially in men? And is it true what he said about modern cannabis?
Right.
Is it really worse than it used to be?
Okay, so first things first, cannabis and anger. Is there any truth to that, or is G just, being G?
Well, the research is all over the place. It's
Right.
really inconclusive. There have been some studies that show a connection, like a correlation,
Okay.
between using cannabis and aggression, especially in people who already have anger issues.
Right.
Or if they've got other mental health stuff going on.
Okay.
But here's the thing, correlation doesn't equal causation.
So just because someone smokes weed and also has a temper doesn't mean the weed is causing the anger.
Exactly. It could be a million other things. Their genes, how they were raised, stress, other drugs they might be using. It's a classic case of needing more research.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about his claim that modern weed is, inferior
Right.
to what it was back in the day?
Yeah, the good old days, right?
He made it sound like the quality is just tanked,
Yeah.
and that's why people are supposedly more angry now.
That's a common thing to hear,
Yeah.
but it's often more about nostalgia than actual science.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The reality is, growing cannabis, it's become really advanced.
Okay.
Growers use all these sophisticated techniques now to create all these different strains with specific effects.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Specific effects.
Yeah, so we're talking about cannabinoid profiles.
Cannabinoid profiles. Okay, now we're getting a little technical.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Break it down for me.
Okay, so cannabinoids. These are the chemical compounds in cannabis.
Okay.
And they interact with our body's endocannabinoid system.
Which does what now?
It's basically involved in regulating all sorts of things: mood, sleep, appetite, pain.
Wow. Okay.
You've probably heard of THC and CBD.
Yeah.
Those are the most famous cannabinoids, but there are over 100 others,
Get out.
and they can all have different effects.
Okay, so when people talk about different strains of cannabis having different effects, like some being more relaxing, some more energizing, they're talking about these different cannabinoid profiles.
Bingo. And modern growing techniques let growers tweak those profiles so they can make strains with specific effects. So this idea that all modern cannabis is tainted or chemical-laden, it's just not accurate.
Right. It's more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It's like anything else. Technology, innovation, you can use it for good or bad. You've got your small organic growers, and then you've got your mass-produced, pesticide-heavy operations.
Right. It's the same with everything.
Exactly. You can't just lump them all together.
Okay, that makes sense. But isn't there a huge elephant in the room when it comes to cannabis?
What's that?
The legal situation?
Oh, absolutely. Prohibition has created this massive black market.
Right.
And in the black market, there's zero quality control.
So are you saying that those bad batches G talked about could just be a product of that unregulated market, not some inherent problem with modern cannabis itself.
Exactly. It's like comparing moonshine to a fine-aged whiskey.
Okay, yeah.
Totally different processes, totally different risks.
Right.
And that's why we need to be talking about drug policy, regulation, harm reduction. But we can dive into that another time.
Agreed. Let's get back to the parenting side of things. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Fear, discipline, spoiled kid syndrome, cannabis cultivation.
It's a lot.
What's the main takeaway here? What should we be remembering from all of this?
I think the biggest thing, especially for parents today, is critical thinking and open communication.
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in sound bites and extreme viewpoints,
Right.
especially when it comes to something as emotionally charged as parenting. It's like we're wired to look for those easy answers, those quick fixes, especially when it's something as messy as raising kids.
Yeah, and Guy's kind of feeding into that.
Totally.
Even if what he's saying is a bit out there, at least it feels definite.
Right, like a sure thing in a world that's anything but. And that's exactly why it's so important to hear different perspectives. To actually look at the research, to question your own assumptions. It's easy to get sucked into those fear-based stories.
Yeah.
But what kids really need is love, understanding, and honestly just talking to them.
Yeah. Which brings us to something G only briefly mentioned, technology.
Oh boy, yeah.
He touched on video games, phones, but mostly as like sources of conflict.
Yeah.
Potential addiction. But that's the world our kids are growing up in. How can we even parent in the digital age?
It's the million-dollar question, right?
Yes, it is.
And honestly, it usually causes more anxiety than it solves.
Yeah, it does.
I think the first thing is to ditch this idea that technology is automatically bad.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere, and it's shaping the world our kids are inheriting.
Right.
So we need to approach it the same way we do other parts of parenting, with balance.
So not treating it like some monster under the bed, but also not pretending it's all sunshine and rainbows.
Exactly. Tech can be amazing for learning, connecting,
Right.
even building important skills. Think about the creativity in video games, the problem solving they learn navigating those digital worlds.
It's true.
And social media. It lets them connect with people across the globe.
It's like anything else. Fire, water, smartphones. It's not good or bad on its own. It's how we use it and how we teach our kids to use it responsibly.
100%. And that goes back to setting those boundaries we talked about, finding that balance so tech doesn't take over their lives, making sure they still have those real-life interactions, get outside, be creative, all those things that make a well-rounded person.
He seemed to be all about the hardcore approach.
Yeah.
Like almost zero tolerance. Does that even work? Or is it more about finding ways to make technology a part of our kids' lives, but in a healthy way?
I'm always careful about those one-size-fits-all answers in parenting.
Okay.
Every kid is different. Every family is different. What works for one might be a disaster for another.
Right.
But usually, I'm not a fan of being too restrictive.
Because it just backfires.
Yeah.
Like the forbidden fruit.
Exactly. You just end up in a power struggle. Instead of actually talking about tech, setting clear expectations, maybe even letting kids have a say.
So again, it's that collaboration over control thing.
Yeah. Instead of no screens ever, it's, hey, how can we make this work for everyone?
I like that.
It's about teaching them digital literacy, how to think critically about what they see online,
Right.
how to be aware of the risks, giving them the tools to handle this digital world.
And we have to walk the walk.
Right, absolutely. Kids are always watching us,
Yeah.
learning from what we do, not just what we say. So we have to find that balance too. Put down our own phones sometimes. Make time for real conversations. Show them that technology doesn't have to rule our lives.
This has been amazing. Seriously, you've given us so much to think about, not just about Dee's unique opinions, but about how to navigate raising kids in this constantly changing world.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from all of this?
One thing, I'd say parent with empathy. Really try to understand your child's world, what motivates them, what scares them, what brings them joy. Listen more than you talk. Choose to work with them, not against them. And most importantly, create that space where you can always talk openly and honestly with respect. That's how you build a strong connection with your kids and help them grow.
That's beautiful. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of that. This deep dive has been quite the journey. From fear-based parenting to the digital age, we've covered a lot. And remember, there's no one right way to raise a child. It's about finding what works for your family, listening to different perspectives, and always leading with empathy and open communication. Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep those conversations flowing, and keep diving deep.